Arch Manning is now a bust. Kalen DeBoer on his way to being fired out of Alabama. We'll be breaking that down, all the big matchups from week 1, and also previewing all the big matchups from week 2 and all the big stories in college football. We have a great show in store, so make sure you stay tuned. Welcome back to the Anthony Balester YouTube channel. I am your host, Anthony Balester. As I said before, we have a lot of great topics to get into. Ohio State stunning the Texas Longhorns. Florida State upsetting Alabama. Miami having a great game, beating Notre Dame. Also, TCU absolutely dismantling Bill Belichick. We got a lot of big matchups we got to preview this week, including Oklahoma versus Michigan. So make sure that not only are you watching this YouTube video, but also make sure you subscribe to the YouTube channel. The more subscribers we have, the more we can put into these videos and the more content we can bring out. So it definitely helps. Also, not only should you subscribe to this YouTube channel, but also you make sure that you like and share this video with anybody you know that is a huge football fan. We'll be bringing you college football, now NFL star, and we're going to be bringing you NFL and college football each and every week. Make sure to follow us across all social medias. We are on Twitter at Balester555 and Instagram and TikTok at Anthony Balester. So let's get right into it. Let's not waste any time. We had the biggest matchup maybe of the entire regular season in week 1, and that was Ohio State going up against and hosting the Texas Longhorns. Now, my prediction in one way was accurate, but in another it wasn't. I said it was going to be a low-scoring defensive game, which it was. Both teams played good defensively, but I did say Texas was going to be able to pull it out. I was absolutely wrong. Looks like Ohio State was able to pull out the win. And, man, their defense just played really, really great football, giving Arch Manning troubles throughout the entire game. Now, I do think what he played in the fourth quarter, Arch Manning, I think he played much better than he did in the first 3 quarters. We've seen the first 3 quarters, he couldn't get anything going. And then as the fourth quarter got along, Arch Manning was dissecting the defense a little bit better. He did have that touchdown to get him back into the game. But ultimately, it wasn't enough. You've seen that there was mechanical errors. There was easy throws that he was missing. He wasn't giving his receivers a lot of easy passes, throwing it behind Ryan Williams a few times and others. And it seems like a lot of his throws were just off. You know, the mechanics were off. The footwork was off. And you got to give Ohio State defense credit. Obviously, Matt Patricia, the defensive coordinator, drew up a great game plan, showing that Super Bowl experience that he had, the NFL experience he had, is translating really well and really fast to the NFL level. I mean, this Ohio State defense, you know, we stated coming into this game all the players that they did lose, particularly in the defensive line, but it seemed like they didn't have no drop-off. Their defensive tackles came to play, and their secondary and linebackers, that was the story of the game. I mean, Sonny Styles, Reese, those linebackers were wrecking havoc against all the running backs and all the tight ends. And then the secondary, you know, obviously you had Caleb Downs, McLean, Jermaine Matthews. Those guys were not really given any room or any separation to any of these great Texas wide receivers. So, yeah, Arch Manning played bad and, you know, didn't turn it up until it was too late. But ultimately, we got to give credit to the Ohio State defense and their secondary. You know, if you watch, the film breakdowns, you would see that these guys were just, sound, in their techniques and what they needed to do. You know, they weren't giving these guys much room to get anything. You know, they were completely covering the field. They were shutting down anything that was coming their way. And like I said, their linebackers and secondary played great. Obviously, Jermaine Matthews got the interception. Caleb Downs was all over the field. And these linebackers are so fast. You know, Sonny Styles is not only fast, but the guy's big. The guy's 220, 230 pounds, and he's lightning. So that, to get anything past those guys, and that's why you've seen Arch Manning at the beginning of the game had to do so many dump offs, and his yards per attempt were so low because these linebackers in secondary were shutting it all down. And then, with the defensive line, with all the losses they had, you had guys like Curry and others who really stepped up. Obviously, also Ohio State's best defensive lineman, Keontae Jackson got hurt, but even when he went out, the backups came in, and there was really not much drop-off. I do think Arch Manning in his first real start, not his first actual start, we know this is his third, but his first real start, going on the road, playing in the shoe against Ohio State, the defending champions who look like they may have the best defense in all of college football, and they had one of, if not the best defense last year, and it looks like their defense may be even better. Obviously, that's a tough ask. When you look at what Texas was able to do, Texas did really well defensively as well. Obviously, they gave up that long touchdown pass to Carnell Tate, but for the most part, they did pretty well defensively. Their defensive line stuffed the run when needed to be. Ohio State's running backs really didn't get much off. Julian Sayin was held in check for most of the game. I think that's why he was held under 200 yards. And Jeremiah Smith. They had Jeremiah Smith, the best player in all college football, frustrated all game, causing him to have drops and some mental errors, and he just wasn't able to get open at all against this Texas defense. We know Texas with Anthony Hill, Colin Simmons, Malik Muhammad, and Tafe at safety. Texas has a great defense. We also thought they would have a great offense, but it looks like Ohio State was able to one-up them, and their defense was able to make the plays. And I know he was held under 200 yards, but Julian Sayin did, have a better game than Arch Manning. He kept the ball clean, and, he had less errors than Arch Manning had. So it seemed like Julian Sayin was able to make a couple more plays. That long touchdown to Carnell Tate was, magnificent. And obviously, Arch Manning had his own long touchdown to Livingstone. But at the end of the day, Texas wasn't able to get it done. I think they'll rebound. I still think Arch Manning can be one of the best quarterbacks in college football. But it does seem like Ohio State is going to defend their championship well. They're not going anywhere anytime soon. And their offense is only going to get better. We know Arch Manning is going to only get better, but you can say the same thing about Ohio State. They had a very young offense with Julian Sayin in his first real start. Not even just his first real start, but his first actual start. The guy has never started a game and came in there and played pretty well. He did what he needed to do, and he was the better quarterback. He showed why he was a top recruit coming out. So Ohio State looks like they're a force to be reckoned with. And, going on the road to them, I would not want to be a team that's got to go on the road to Ohio State anytime soon. So I do think Texas will rebound, but it goes to show you that Ohio State's going to be in the thick of it again. And because of that defense led by Matt Patricia and the improvements that they will make on offense with Jeremiah Smith, Carnell Tate, the running backs they have, the offensive line that looked, pretty good. We thought we'd have a drop-off compared to last year, but it doesn't seem like it. Seems like Ohio State may be just as good as they were last year. So I can see why they're going to move up significantly in the rankings, and they're going to be competing again to be the number one team in the nation. Now we got to talk about a huge upset this college football weekend, and that was Florida State upset in Alabama. I guess all the bulletin board material that Thomas Castellanos was able to get Alabama didn't really matter at all. I guess he was absolutely right, and he looks like the smart one in this. We thought Thomas Castellanos would be eating crow and would be regretting some of the remarks he made, but I guess what he said has some, warrant to it. He said Alabama doesn't have Nick Saban to save them anymore, and I guess that doesn't. I guess that explains this game perfectly. Alabama, their defense looked slow. It seemed like every time Florida State got any sort of opening in a window, they were not catching them. Once they broke to the open field, they didn't have the speed to catch any of their running backs or fast wide receivers. And it seemed like their defense was a little on the weak side. They were kind of getting pushed around, and that's not something we would ever see out of a Nick Saban team. I know Kalen DeBoer is more of an offensive guy, but that's something you don't want to see out of any team, just getting pushed around off the field. I know the injuries coming into this game really, really hurt this team more so than I thought. Alabama not having Jam Miller really hurt this team. They really weren't able to get anything significant in the running game. And on the other side, not having Tim Keenan in there to stop some of Florida State's rushing yards and being able to really wreak havoc on Florida State's offensive line really caused Alabama some problems as well. And, something that we've seen last year and this year, Alabama's really struggled with against mobile quarterbacks. And Thomas Castellanos is one of the best dual-threat quarterbacks in the nation. So he was giving them fits all day long. And, Kalen DeBoer, I know we're still only in game one of year two for him, but now in an expanded 12-team playoffs where when Nick Saban was making the playoffs almost every year in the 4-team playoff era. In a 12-team playoff, Nick Saban would have made the playoffs every single year. Now, if you're going to be looking at a Kalen DeBoer, who now, if in his second year in a row, can't make an expanded 12-team playoffs, there's definitely a case to be made about why he should be on the hot seat. It's not like Alabama lacks talent. Alabama has had one of the top recruiting classes each and every year. So the guy's got the talent, but the talent is just not coming to fruition. And when that happens, then you got to point the finger at the coach. They're still having these mental errors. They still don't seem like they're buttoned up. I do think Ty Simpson may not be the answer. The guy was a decently high recruit coming out of college, but there's a reason why he sat on the bench for so long. He sat on the bench behind Bryce Young, who is probably the best quarterback Alabama had. So I'm not going to, put anything against him for that or hold that against him. But then he got beat out by Jalen Milroe. He did go in there for that one start, didn't do anything at all. And now this year he's starting pretty much because out of necessity. All the other guys they got, like Keelan Russell was an 18-year-old freshman. Austin Mack is a 19, 20-year-old, I think, redshirt sophomore. So these guys just don't have the experience and don't know the system as well. Where Ty Simpson does know the system, and he's been around Alabama for quite some time. And he just seems like he couldn't get anything going. I know having Jaden Roberts, the guard for Alabama, out definitely hurt. And Caden Proctor, who's supposed to be one of the top tackles in the draft, he didn't have a great day protecting him from this much improved Florida State pass rush. Florida State's defense and secondary, edge rush to the defensive line, look much improved than last year. So I also think we got to factor in. I know according to the way, it was written up, it was an unranked Florida State team beating Alabama. But I think the way they played it, when it's all said and done, Florida State is going to be a ranked team. And I think that loss will look better as the season goes on. But at the end of the day, you're Alabama. You don't lose to a team like Florida State. And when you look at the rest of Alabama's schedule, yeah, we know in the 12-team playoff, if you have 2 losses, you'll probably make the playoffs. If you got 3, man, you're really on thin ice there, right on the bubble. And once you get 4, you're out of it. We know when Alabama got their 3rd loss last year against Oklahoma, that's pretty much took them out of it. This was a game that Alabama needed to win. When you look at the rest of the schedule, when they go up against all these great SEC teams, this was one that they had to have. The schedule is going to only get harder now. I know they do got Louisiana Monroe next week. They should beat them. But when you look at the rest of the schedule, it's going to get really tough for Alabama. And the fact that they're already down 1 game before they even get into all their hard SEC matchups, it doesn't really get this team much room for error. As we just stated, you probably, if you want to almost lock yourself into the playoffs, you got to have only 2 losses, which means now Alabama, with that tough schedule, is going to have to go 10-1 the rest of the way. That's a really, really hard ask, in this very tough, deep, best conference in the country in the SEC, where every single game is going to be tough. Even teams like Vanderbilt now are no easy out. So Alabama's got a lot to fix. Ryan Williams, their best player, seemed a little off. He had a couple drops and took some big hits, and now he's in concussion protocol. Hopefully we get him back after the Louisiana Monroe game. We don't really need him for that, hopefully. But hopefully we get him back after that. But still, Alabama, hurts me to say this as an Alabama fan, they may be on the outside looking in for the playoffs all over again. This game reminded me of the Oklahoma game where you thought they were going to win, and they kind of just got smacked in the mouth, and they really didn't have an answer for it and had a response back. So obviously Alabama will get some of their players back. They should get Jam Miller back for when they go to SEC play. Hopefully they get Jaden Roberts and Tim Keenan back hopefully soon. But man, when you're going up against Georgia and these other teams, Alabama is going to really have a tough time competing against these guys. And I do think if Ty Simpson keeps playing the way he does, we're going to have to put one of these young guys in and see what they got, have them go through their growing pains this year so that maybe in 2026, Kalen DeBoer maybe gets another chance, and maybe we could see a highly touted guy like Keon Russell, who I think can be a Bryce Young or a Tua Tagovailoa type guy. Maybe he could be the guy that gets them over the hump. But if Kalen DeBoer can't get this team to a 12-team playoff after 2 years, I know he's got a huge high buyout that's going to cost Alabama quite substantial, tens of millions of dollars. But, man, if you can't get to a 12-team playoff with this talent, with all these great players that you have, particularly on defense, with LT Overton, these great linebackers that they have, the depth that this team has in secondary with Xavier Brown, Keon Sabb, and Bray Hubbard. If these guys aren't playing what they're supposed to or what their talent warrants, then you got to look at the head coach. And maybe Kalen DeBoer's offensive system and offensive mindset doesn't fit a team like Alabama, who, I know that they've changed their style before where they become more about the quarterbacks and the passing game. But at the end of the day, this is a team that likes to run the ball and beat you in the trenches. They haven't been able to do that the last 2 years. And I think they might want to bring in a coach that could get that going and get this defense with the talent that they have to play that they will. We also had another game that was really substantial, a game that was very close, another defensive game between two of the top quarterbacks in the college football and in the draft, and that was LSU and Clemson. LSU was able to defeat Clemson 17-10 and was a very back and forth game that could have went either way. Kate Klubnik and Clemson made some plays at the end to try to make this a comeback, but at the end of the day, again, it wasn't enough. And when I look at this game, LSU has a really good defense. They haven't had a good defense the last 2 years, and with the returning pieces they had with Harold Perkins, Whit Weeks, some of their other players like Dominic McKinney, all the transfers they brought in the secondary has really made a difference for this team. We said that there were a question mark because when you got so many guys, potentially 6 new starters on defense through the transfer portal, we got to see how all those guys gel. Well, they gelled pretty well with each other, and the secondary looks much improved. We know LSU was always known for the secondary in years past. Well, now with the recruits and with the transfer guys they brought in, it seems like LSU's finally got that great secondary. They also got a great linebacking core. They got a great defensive line and pass rush. But also, when you look at LSU, we also had a lot of new faces on the offensive line. And when you're going up against Clemson, who has Peter Woods, who's projected to be the top defensive tackle in the draft, T.J. Parker, who's in the conversation for the best edge rusher in the upcoming draft, we were like, hey, how is LSU and the new offensive line going to be able to protect these guys and be able to keep these guys off of Garrett Nussmeier? Well, for the most part, they held up pretty well, actually, keeping Garrett Nussmeier able to be clean. I know we did take a couple hits, but for the most part, Garrett Nussmeier was able to keep clean, and he was able to get the ball to some of his speedy receivers. They do got some speed at wide receiver with, Anderson, Brown, and others. So this looks like an LSU team, that wins the national championship. Now, we can't take too much off of one game, but if they play like this each and every week, they can win the national championship. But LSU has a history to where when they have a fifth-year quarterback, they seem to pop. When they had Joe Burrow as the fifth-year senior quarterback, they popped and won the national championship. When they had Jaden Daniels, their offense was one of the best. He won the Heisman. Now it was their defense that hurt them that year. Now you got Garrett Nussmeier now trying to, continue that lineage. Now he's your fifth-year senior quarterback. And, wow, man, he was dicing up this team, making really, really tremendous plays. Their tight end is going to be one of the top tight ends. He can't come out next year because he's only a sophomore, but Tredez is one of the best tight ends. The guy is super, super athletic. That's why he was able to moss the Clemson defensive back for that touchdown. So LSU really, really, really impressed me. And when I looked at these quarterbacks coming into this game, I mean, I'm a huge Kate Klubnik fan. Because the Kate Klubnik has got so much mobility, he's able to make plays on the run. I really thought Kate Klubnik was going to be the better quarterback because we know last year Garrett Nussmeier had his issues, in terms of being consistent. We know he had the really big plays throwing touchdowns and things like that, but he had a lot of interceptions as well. Well, he wasn't throwing many interceptions today. He was dicing up the defense, getting the ball to his playmakers like Aaron Anderson, Brown, Xavier Thomas, who's got a lot of speed. And again, like I said, the guy who's going to be in the conversation for the best tight end in college football is a sophomore and Tredez Green. Garrett Nussmeier looked like the better quarterback and looked like he could potentially be one of the top, 2 or 3 draft picks in the NFL draft. And why he may be in the conversation for the top quarterback upcoming. When you watch these two guys on the field come into the season, because he was more consistent and more accurate, I trusted Kate Klubnik a lot more. Well, after this game, I have a complete opposite opinion on this. I think Garrett Nussmeier looked like the better quarterback, and seeing them both on the same field together, it was pretty, obvious. And with LSU's defensive guys, you had Mansour Delane. You had, when he came in there for the second half, AJ Hussey. This secondary looks like it's legit. And their new offensive linemen that they got in, there's some of the young guys, look like there's no drop off from what they had last year. Yeah, they may be inexperienced, but it looks like that's not affect them at all. So I really, really like LSU going forward into this season. And I think LSU proved why maybe this is the year that they're going to go all in. Brian Kelly was finally able to break that streak of losing these season openers. They've been so close, losing these one-possession games, and Brian Kelly was finally able to get over the hump. I'm really, really happy for him. And in terms of Clemson, I do think that they'll respond, but playing in a very weak schedule in the ACC, this was a high marquee win that they needed to get to put on their resume. Now, obviously, if they win the SEC, they probably ultimately still get one of those auto bids into the playoffs. But in terms of seeding, they're going to have to pretty much run through the entire ACC and probably win it. But this would have been a huge marquee win to where if they would have won this out-of-conference game, no one would have been able to use their weak conference against them. Well, now they won't be able to have that to their disposal. I do think my preseason pick Clemson, I still think they could win it all. I remember last year when I picked Ohio State preseason and when they lost to Michigan, everybody writ Ohio State off and didn't give them any chance. And they still ultimately ended up going on and winning it. I think Clemson could do the same. I think they could use this as motivation to rebound. I do think Clay Klubnik will be better. LSU was one of the top defenses who'll play all season, probably until they get to the playoffs. But, man, Clemson's going to, have a tough time. And they definitely gave people like me who picked them some, pause for concern. But I still think just like Ohio State and like I said last year, I think that they'll rebound. And I still will stick with Clemson to ultimately win the national championship. But speaking of teams in the ACC that, I predicted to make the playoffs, but also maybe be able to challenge now Clemson, and looks like they're not far off, and that's the Miami Hurricanes. It looks like the Miami Hurricanes are back. The Miami Hurricanes was able to go out there and stun Notre Dame. It was a very close game that couldn't have went either way. Miami ended up winning 27-24, but like I said, coming into the season, Miami had a great offense last year. I said that they were going to have a great defense this year. Not saying Carson Beck is as good as Cam Ward is, but he's still one of the top quarterbacks in the country. He still could end up being a first or second round NFL pick quarterback. And I said when he's held up right and he gets protection, he could be one of the top quarterbacks. Well, Miami has got an NFL caliber offensive line with 3 or 4 NFL guys on that squad. They got a great receiving core. They had a freshman in Tony emerge. They had some other guys as well. I mean, Daniels, that catch he made is going to be one of the top catches all season. So he's got receivers to get the ball to, and their defense. The reason what held them back last year was Cam Ward was expected to win shootout after shootout, and that's just not sustainable. Well, this year they actually have a defense. Ruben Bain now is fully healthy. They got all these young pass rushers. They've had so many great recruits in the pass rushing department, and now you're seeing all these guys' talent be on display. Ruben Bain, who was projected to be a top pick, had a hamstring injury last year, so we didn't really get to see what he did. But now he's shown you why so many people thought he had the potential to be a top draft pick next year, and he was pretty much unblockable. I know Notre Dame has some young guys in the offensive line, but it didn't matter who was protecting him, whether if it was a freshman or a senior. Ruben Bain was getting to the quarterback one way or another. I thought for Notre Dame, their secondary with Christian Gray and Leonard Moore, who's, Leonard Moore is the best corner in college football, and this is supposed to be one of the best secondaries. Carson Beck, now that he was given time in the pocket, was able to make plays and get plays against this great secondary. So if Carson Beck and these receivers are able to, have explosive plays against a secondary like Notre Dame, what do you think they're going to be able to do to the entire the entire ACC conference and the other teams Miami's going to have to play? So Miami's finally got a defense, and they still got a great offense. I think C.J. Carr in his first game, I know he had some bad plays and wasn't able to keep the ball clean the entire game. I think he did have a turnover. But I think for his first game, he put this team in position to win. I just think it's tough when you got a guy like Ruben Bain and others coming at you the entire game. I think Miami, who also had a young secondary last year, has now that these guys are more experienced, I think their secondary is much better. So I think Miami is a team that's going to be able to compete and give Clemson in the ACC a run for their money. I do think Notre Dame, now that they got a big game coming up in a few weeks against Texas A&M, that's going to be a must-win for them. Since Notre Dame doesn't play in the conference, they don't have an opportunity to get one of those automatic bids. So that just makes Notre Dame's that much more tougher for them to make the playoffs. They did lose to Northern Illinois last year, was able to rebound. So, I'm not going to count them out for losing to Miami, which is obviously not nearly as bad as last year when they lost to Northern Illinois. But I think this makes that Texas A&M game very, very important. I think a 10-2 Notre Dame team has a much tougher way and chance of making the playoffs than, say, a 10-2 SEC team or a 10-2 Big Ten team. But I'm not saying it's a must-win because they probably could still make the playoffs potentially as a 2-win team. But that Texas A&M game just becomes that more and more important. I think C.J. Carr will continue to get better. I didn't like how they didn't use Jeremiah Love, their best player. I don't think they used him enough, particularly at the beginning of the game. They kind of started using him more late. I know Miami's defense was pretty stout in the department and stopping the run, but Notre Dame has, one of the best running back duos with him and Price, and I expected more out of that. When you got the best running back in college football in Jeremiah Love, you got to use him a lot more. I do think we're able to see what Notre Dame could potentially be in the receiving department with Malachi Fields and others. This is one of the best receiving corps Notre Dame's had in a few years. And I think we've seen what those guys' potential could be. Now, the last thing I want to bring up, won't spend much time on it because it was an entertaining game, was TCU absolutely dismantling Bill Belichick in North Carolina. North Carolina looked like they were going to have a good game. They went down the field and got a score on the opening drive. But after that, they just got absolutely dismantled. Their offense wasn't able to get anything done. They weren't able to get sustained drives. They weren't able to keep the ball clean, having turnover after turnover. Gio Lopez was running for his life. The offensive line wasn't able to protect. On the defensive side of the ball, they had no answer for Josh Hoover, Dyer, and those guys. They also gave up a huge explosive run to Barnes at the beginning of the second half. So they're pretty much getting destroyed at every single facet of the game. And I think once Max Johnson went in there for Gio Lopez's injury, I think the offense looked a little bit better. I think Max Johnson, coming off a significant injury, I think that's why he didn't want to rush him in. But he's a guy who's got a lot of experience. He's a 23, 24-year-old, sixth-year senior. I think he's the answer at quarterback for them for at least this year. But for now, when you have 30 or 40 transfers, 20 or 30 freshman players, it just shows you that as great as Bill Belichick is, this team just doesn't have the talent. There's just a too big talent gap between them and even a team like TCU, who TCU's got talent on offense and defense, but they're probably a top 5 team in the Big 12. And just the gap between a top 5 team in the Big 12 and North Carolina right now seems like the Grand Canyon. Seems like Bill Belichick and North Carolina are in for a very, very long season. I think maybe in a couple years that this team can get together. But we got to remember when Deion Sanders went to Colorado, they had a bunch of transfers and a bunch of new players as well. And I believe they only won 4 or 5 games. Now, they at least had Shedeur Sanders. They at least had Travis Hunter, one of the top quarterbacks and one of the top players in college football, and also Shiloh Sanders, who was one of the top safeties in college football. This North Carolina team doesn't even have that. So this is going to be a very long season. I mean, thank God they play in the ACC and not the SEC, but I thought coming into this season, this team would be at least a bowl-eligible team that could win 6 games. I'm having my questions about that. This may be, a team that may win 2 to 4 games and are not, playing after the 12 games are up. But I do think that Belichick will be able to analyze the team, see what the weaknesses are. The freshmen will be a year better next year, but I think this is a team that's in for a long season with a lot of growing pains. But I do think Belichick will get this team bowl eligible and get the North Carolina program to probably a perennial 7 to 8 win team each and every year. But it for sure won't be this year. Now, just to recap everything that we weren't able to speak about in week 1, we had South Florida, who absolutely dumped Boise State. South Florida's got some talent. They got speed at the wide receiver. I love Byram, the quarterback. He's a great dual threat guy. And, with the trick plays and everything else, they were absolutely able to destroy Boise State, who a lot of people thought Boise State was going to be the team that makes the college football playoffs, representing the group of 5. Now, it doesn't seem like they're going to be able to represent them, and it seems like South Florida may be that team. Well, we'll have to see how they play the whole season. We know it's a one-game scenario. But, man, as a group of 5 team, you could only really have one loss if you're lucky. Because typically, some years you do get an undefeated group of 5 team. Boise State, with one loss already, they're going to have to win out just to have a chance. Maddox, the quarterback, Maddox Mason, had a really bad game. They weren't able to get anything in the run game. Their defense was very off. It goes to show you that the edge rushers and the corner they lost in the draft, losing Ashton Genty, really hurt this team more so than a lot of people expected. Also, speaking of group of 5, I thought Jake Retzlaff with Tulane, they look like the best team in their group of 5 along with South Florida. They were absolutely destroying Northwestern. I know kind of a weaker Power 4 team, but at the end of the day, still a Power 4 conference team, man. They look like they didn't belong on the same field. Tulane's secondary looked absolutely lights out, shutting down anything that Northwestern could throw at them. And Drake Retzlaff only being on the team for, 30 days, maybe less. No drop-off from last year, showing why he was one of the top quarterbacks in the country last year and why he'll be one of the top quarterbacks again. I also want to bring up Georgia Tech. Edging out the win over Colorado. Colorado looked like, coming into this game, most people picked Georgia Tech. So you don't want to, knock Colorado for losing a game they were supposed to lose. But when you watch the game, it looked like they had every opportunity to win it. When you start the game off forcing 3 turnovers and only getting, I believe, 7 points out of those turnovers, that's not acceptable. When you force Georgia Tech into the first quarter they had where Georgia Tech was turning the ball over, they couldn't get anything going in the passing game, running game, giving this offensive line and Haynes King trouble all game. Colorado literally wasn't able to capitalize it outside of one touchdown. I think Caden Salter had a really off game. There was wide receivers that were open that, if he would have made these passes, we could be talking about a different outcome here. This is a guy who has good escape ability. You can see whenever Georgia Tech was able to get any sort of pass rush on him, he was able to escape and get the ball off, but he just wasn't able to get the ball to his receiver. He was overthrowing easy passes to receivers that were wide open. And it just goes to show you when you go from one of the most accurate quarterbacks in Shedeur Sanders to now a guy who can make a simple 5 to 10 yard pass. It's going to be tough for this team to win games. And it's just unfortunate because I thought Colorado's defense played really well. I said that this would probably be the best defense Colorado's had in the Deion Sanders era. And in moments they showed that, but they weren't able to capitalize. In the second quarter and onward, Haynes King was able to run all over, this defense and make plays. And because Colorado wasn't able to consistently get anything in the passing game, I think ultimately that's what cost them the game. I'm not going to blame Colorado's defense. Haynes King, one of the most experienced top dual threat quarterbacks. That's why he's one of the top guys in rushing touchdowns. This team's got good running backs. They got some decent wide receivers, a decent offensive line. But when your quarterback can't make these easy throws, you're going to be in for a long season. So that's something Colorado's going to have to fix. And if not, we may see the 18-year-old freshman Juju Lewis sooner rather than later. South Carolina getting the win over Virginia Tech. Virginia Tech's defensive line looked great. They look like they're going to have one of the top defensive lines in the country. But when you're going up against these, superb athletes like Lenore Sellers, who even when nothing's there, and you got guys in his face, being, 6'3", 6'4", 230 pounds, he's able to just break tackles and rush for the first down. He looked like a guy who, because of his talent, is going to have a really good opportunity if he continues to play like this, why he could be the number 1 pick in the draft. If this guy continues to be as accurate as he was, with the deep passes and the short intermediate throws, with the size and the athleticism. This guy probably is going to end up running a 4.5, 4.6 with that size and strength. So this guy is one of the most talented quarterbacks in the country. With Nick Harbor, who's 6'5", 235, running a 4.3, 4.4 track star. I don't know how you're going to be able to stop these guys. And then with Dylan Stewart, one of the most explosive edge rushers on the other side, giving Kyron Drones fits all game. I said coming this season, South Carolina probably has 3 of the top 5 or 6 most talented players in the country, and they all showed that. Kansas State, having the hangover from playing in Ireland, nearly beating North Dakota. I know North Dakota is one of the best, FCS teams, but man, North Dakota gave them everything they had, and Kansas State had to have a late game-winning drive to win that game. Tennessee, Joey Aguilar, really playing well, showing maybe no drop-off from him and Nico Iamaleava. I still think Nico Iamaleava is the better quarterback, but Joey Aguilar, being experienced as he is, being in college football for quite some time, he's showing why, Tennessee has a lot of faith in him. And we know Josh Heupel is great with quarterbacks. He always finds a way. With the defense that this team had, even without their top corner, with, Josephs and others, this defense is going to be one of the top defenses again. They were given Syracuse's offense fits. I know Syracuse had some moments where Steve Angeli and Jonte Cook were able to make some plays, but they were just completely outmatched by Tennessee's defense and by their offense. So if their offense is going to play like this, Tennessee may be as good as what we thought when they had Nico Iamaleava, and maybe the drop-off that we thought that they were going to have because of losing their starting quarterback maybe won't come to fruition. And then lastly I want to talk about is just the level of play we saw from the true freshman quarterbacks. There was a lot of standouts that were true freshman quarterbacks that played. Bryce Underwood, with the multiple touchdowns he had, going up against a New Mexico team who had nothing to lose. I thought he showed as an 18-year-old freshman in his first collegiate game why he has so much potential. Just like we said with Lenore Sellers, this guy's got the size, the strength, the arm strength, the mobility, and looks like he's got the accuracy. So this guy, if this is just, him scratching the surface of what he's going to be in college in 2-3 years, I mean, the rest of the Big Ten in college football is going to be in trouble. You have Malik Washington, the freshman quarterback for Maryland. I know he was going up against a, smaller competition against a group of 5 team, but they couldn't stop him throwing, 3 or 4 touchdowns, pinpoint accuracy. He was unbelievable. Cal's quarterback was probably the best one. Oregon State didn't have an answer for him. This guy started off like 6 for 6 with like 2 or 3 touchdowns. He ended up being Pro Football Focus, his highest graded quarterback of any quarterback, freshman or senior, in the country. And then lastly, you had Bear Buckmeyer from BYU, again, going up against smaller competition. But, man, they had to pull him, in the beginning of the game because the team was just absolutely blowing out. Every time he had the ball, they were going straight down the field. So these true freshman quarterbacks seem ready to play from day one. Now, obviously, it's only 1 week, so we shall see how the season ends up playing out for them. But, man, if these true freshmen are going to keep playing like this, we're going to be in for a treat for the next 2 to 3 years watching these guys. Now, we're going to get into some week 2 matchups in our predictions. We got to start off with the biggest matchup this week, and that's number 15 Michigan on the road going to SEC territory against number 18 Oklahoma. Oklahoma is favored in this, probably because they are the home team, by 5.5 as we record this show. Now, obviously, these point spreads could change, but at the end of the day, it's not going to change who I pick ultimately. So whatever I say, you can just take it to the bank. This is going to be a very good matchup and very, very interesting. We have 2 great defenses. Oklahoma has some serious star power at the defensive tackle position. I think they also got some star power in the secondary. Same with Michigan. Michigan's got some great pass rushers with Derek Moore and others. TJ Guy. They got some great defensive linemen. They got one of the top linebacking cores, and they got one of the top secondary. So this is 2 teams who don't really have much weaknesses on the defensive side of the ball. I think the two things that are going to make the difference is, one, the home field advantage for Oklahoma. Playing on the road in college football is so hard. It's the toughest environment to play in any sport, is playing on the road in college football, particularly in SEC territory, going to Boomer Sooner Nation. And then I think the difference is going to be the experience at quarterback. John Mateer was one of the top quarterbacks last year for Washington State, and he's going to come in Oklahoma, and now having his second year as a starter, he's obviously got a few years on the 18-year-old freshman Bryce Underwood. I did think Bryce Underwood has potential to be better than John Mateer, but I just think John Mateer at this point at juncture is the more experienced guy. He can do a little bit of everything as well. If you rush him, he could escape the pocket. He could throw on the run. I think right now with the receivers that Oklahoma has with Deion Brooks and others, I also trust Oklahoma's receiving core as well. So I just think Bryce Underwood going on the road against a team like Oklahoma, and I think John Mateer, who I think this year is going to be in the conversation for one of the 5 best quarterbacks in all of college football and potentially be a second, third round NFL draft pick. I just think at this point I trust John Mateer and their offense a little bit more. Now, if they go on and Michigan wins, I wouldn't be surprised. When you got 2 teams like this who are ranked this highly, I wouldn't be surprised with any outcome. But I just think at this point, with the offense that they have, with the receiver talent, with what John Mateer could do on a football field, I just trust him more. So I'm going to go with Oklahoma to win and cover that point spread. I do think that they win this game, probably by 6 points. I think the point spread is right where it needs to be. I think that they'll win this game by 2 field goals. And then we have a huge rivalry matchup between Iowa going on the road to number 16 Iowa State. Iowa State's a 3.5-point favorite. I think, again, this is 2 teams that are going to have great defenses, but I'm going to trust Iowa State again because they're the home team, and I trust Rocco Beck, who he's got the longest streak of consecutive games with a touchdown pass. He's got a lot of young receivers that are starting to emerge. They got 2 great running backs. I know Iowa's got the best quarterback they had in quite some time with Gronkowski. They got one of the top offensive lines in the Big Ten. And obviously Iowa's always going to have a great defense. But I think that gets negated because Iowa State's going to have a great defense. Iowa slightly probably has the better defense, but it's close. I don't think it's close in the quarterback department. I think Rocco Beck, who was one of the top quarterbacks in the Big 12 last year, is again going to be one of the top quarterbacks in the country this year. So I just trust Rocco Beck in the offense more, again, being the home team. I'm going to go with Iowa State to win and cover. Then we got a real tough matchup to predict, and that's number 11, Illinois, going on the road to Duke. I think this is a tough matchup because Duke, being the home team, Illinois going on the road. If this was a neutral site game or if Illinois was the home team, I would favor Illinois. I think it would be a much easier pick. But I just think going on the road to Duke, who now with Darian Mensah, who was one of the top group of 5 quarterbacks last year, now I think this year he'll be one of the top quarterbacks in the ACC with the pass rush and defense that they're going to have with Wesley Williams, the corners that they have with Chandler Rivers, who potentially could be a top 5 corner in the upcoming NFL draft. I think this is a game, again, where you're going to have 2 great defenses. Obviously, Illinois has got a very experienced defense with, Gabe, Jacobs, Xavier Scott, and others. I just think with Duke, I just like their offense. I like Darian Mensah better than I do Luke Altmaier. I think Darian Mensah is a very talented quarterback that could do a little bit of everything. Luke Altmaier is a senior quarterback that could also do a little bit of everything. But I just trust Duke's quarterback better than Mensah. I think he's a budding superstar that's going to be a household name by the end of the season. And I just trust Duke's wide receivers a little more. And ultimately, if we're just talking who's the better team, I think Illinois is the better team. But I think that's why the point spread's so low, because Duke does have a good offense. They do got talent on the defense. And then because they're the home team, I'm going to go with Duke to win in the upset. I may look stupid for that, but hey, we got to pick some upsets on this show. Also, we have another game. We got Baylor going on the road to number 17 SMU. I like SMU here. I think Kevin Jennings and Sawyer Robinson are two of the better quarterbacks in college. I think Kevin Jennings has a more of a better dual threat. I think he's a better runner than Sawyer Robinson. I think as a passer, he's probably almost just as good. So I think Kevin Jennings has a slight edge at the quarterback spot. And I just don't trust Baylor's defense at this time. I do like Keaton Thomas. I do like some of their guys they got in the secondary. But overall, I do not trust their secondary. We saw them get a little bit exposed last week going up against Auburn. And now going up against another dual threat quarterback in Kevin Jennings. And SMU with Isaiah Smith at the edge rusher position. Some of the great players they have at the secondary. They got one of the best safety duos in college football. I just trust SMU's defense a lot more. They're the home team. It's only a 3-point spread. So I'm going to go with SMU in this one. We got an SEC matchup. We got number 20 Ole Miss. 10.5-point favorite. Wow, that's a lot of points. Going on the road in an SEC matchup against Kentucky. I like Kentucky's secondary. I think they got a very talented secondary. I like their running back in Dante Dwell. They got some speed at wide receiver. Ole Miss still has a young quarterback in Austin Simmons, who we saw last week had some errors. He wasn't completely clean. He did have some mistakes, and I expect that to continue. Being a first-year starter and being a 19, 20-year-old quarterback. So to combine that with the Kentucky secondary with experienced quarterback as well for Kentucky and Calzada, I do think Ole Miss is the much better team. I do think that they would win. But going on the road in an SEC matchup in an SEC environment, I just think 10.5 points is way too much to give up. So I do think that Ole Miss wins probably by a little bit more than a touchdown, maybe about 8 or 9. But I think that's way too many points to give up. So I think Austin Simmons will make enough plays, but I do think, again, he'll have some growing pains against this really good Kentucky secondary. So give me Ole Miss to win, but no cover. Now we got another matchup. We got Oklahoma State going on the road to number 6, Oregon. I know 28.5 points is a lot to give up. I'm still going to go with Oregon to win and cover. I just think Oklahoma State, they had a young quarterback in there last week who had some good plays, but he got hurt. I don't think Oklahoma State has the talent per se this year. I think they'll still be a little bit better than last year, but there's just a huge talent gap. And even without Evan Stewart, we saw Dante Moore with one of the best offensive lines, if not the best offensive line in college football, protecting them, giving them time. With the running backs that this team also has, and with the wide receiver with DeCorian Moore, the top receiver recruit coming out, and others, this Oregon team just has way too much talent. And when you look at the defensive side of the ball with Uwangale and the deep pass rush that this team does have, and with the young talented corners that this team has as well, there's a reason why Oregon is ranked this high. Now, we'll see how the season folds. If the depth at wide receiver hurts them later on, but it won't hurt them in this game. They're also, again, the home team. I think this is an easy matchup to pick. I think Dante Moore and DeCorian Moore and Uwangale on that defense is going to wreak havoc on whoever the quarterback is in there for Oklahoma State. I just think Oklahoma State does not have the talent this year to really compete and make a run, even be in the top, tier in the top half of the Big 12. So I think we're talking about a team who's going to be in the bottom half of the Big 12 against a team who's going to be one of the top 3 or 4 teams in the Big 10. Just those conferences alone are different in talent gap. And when you look at one of the worst teams and one of the best teams, I'm going to take Oregon to cover that heavy point spread. And then finally, we have Arizona State, a 6.5-point favorite going in SEC territory to Mississippi State. I'm going to go with Arizona State to win and cover. I know that's a decent amount of points to go on the road, out of conference in the SEC. I do like some of Mississippi State's pieces on defense with Isaiah Smith, Tillman, and others, but I just don't think they have the offense to compete. Jordan Tyson, we saw him dominate last week. There's a reason why he's one of the top returning receivers in the country. Sam Levitt, one of the top returning quarterbacks in college football as well. They obviously still got to find an answer for Cam Scatterbo, but I don't think they'll need it in this game. They also returned almost the entire defense, so this is going to be a much more experienced and better defense than what they had even last year. And this was a team that even played Texas in the playoffs to the wire as well. I just don't think Mississippi State has the offense to keep up. I think their defense will make a couple plays here and there, maybe stop the running attack of Arizona State, but I just think Sam Levin and Jordan Tyson will just be too much, and I just don't think Mississippi State has anybody in offense to really be able to go touchdown for touchdown with Arizona State. So I think Arizona State wins this game between 7 and 10 points, and ultimately covers that point spread. So that's going to be it for this episode. Definitely make sure to subscribe to the YouTube channel. Like I said, the more subscribers we have, the more content like this we can bring to you guys. Make sure to not only subscribe, but you like and share this video to anybody that you do know that loves football. Also, make sure to be following us across all social medias. We're at Twitter at Balester555, and we're on Instagram and TikTok at Anthony Balester. We'll have a great show coming up for you next week. We'll be recapping all the big matchups and all the big things that occur in week 2 of college football. Any breaking news as well. We'll also be previewing all the big matchups in week 3. And like I said, we're going to be bringing you this each and every week. So definitely make sure you stay tuned. We're going to be doing NFL and college football shows each and every week. We got our first NFL show coming out the day after this show premieres. So definitely make sure to stay tuned for that. And finally, I'm Anthony Balester. You guys have a great week and enjoy the college football week 2 this Saturday.